Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Alex Kington to the conversation. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's lovely to see you. As always, I will just do a very brief introduction to how we got to this conversation. Alex, I'll let you do an introduction to who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the big conversation, the big question. So Alex and I have known each other a little while now, I guess, through the travel industry. We're both from a travel industry background, and we've remained quite close, actually, around some of the content that's been out there around mental health. So we won't go into too much depth here. At this point, we'll go into more depth as we go into this conversation. But it's wonderful, as always, to have somebody alongside me having this conversation who is invested in this topic of mental health. So Alex, welcome. Do a better introduction to yourself than I've done, but
Okay, so I'm Alex. Yes, we've kind of hovered around each other on LinkedIn for a while, and I think actually the first time we met, even though we've been connected for a number of years, was only last year at the Business Travel Show. That was the first time we'd actually met in real life, as the kids would say. But yes, I've got a big passion for mental health and mental wellness. And I think a lot of the work that you've been doing really resonates with me. So at the moment, I am a freelance marketing consultant. I set up on my own in 2022. I work as well with Festive Road, so I'm a consultant for them, with them. And yeah, I've got a strong marketing background, so that's kind of my main skill set, and that's what I was doing in the business travel industry when we kind of connected and bumped into each other. So yeah, so this is where I am today on a lovely sunny day, very hot sunny day. This is where it's all led me to.
Oh, brilliant. And it's lovely to finally get together to have this conversation, because I know we did meet at the Business Travel Show last year for the first time, as you say. And it's interesting because we see over the last few years, we've seen so many people on screens and in little sort of windows like this. And actually to meet in person, I think is just one of the most wonderful things. So it's lovely to, although this is virtual, we could have been doing this in the same room together, but we are virtual, connected here together. Here we go. Let's ask the big question, because I am really interested in hearing your journey, your story, your journey with mental health. There you go. That's the question. Tell us a story.
My journey with mental health.
Yeah.
So I think I've always had an interest in mental health. I'm highly empathetic, highly emotionally intelligent, but I was always of the opinion, I think thanks to my Yorkshire upbringing, of we don't talk about things like that. You pull your socks up, crack on, you'll be all right, dust yourself off. And, obviously I'm 40 now, so this was in the 80s. I remember really strong kind of messages from my parents of, don't go to the doctor saying that you're struggling, because that'll be on your records forever and everybody will know. So it was very much not kind of stigmatized, but it was, you just need to sort yourself out. And I think I managed to do this pretty well. But then, as with anything, life happens and the cracks started to happen. So I was really fortunate. And I think because I'd seen other people go through things, I decided to get myself a therapist. So what kind of led to that was I didn't feel right in myself. There were a few things that were happening, behaviors that I'd taken on that weren't really my behaviors, things that were happening in my life. So, for example, our lovely dog got poorly and we had to put him down. And there was no real reaction from me about it. It was just brushed it off.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, this doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel quite right. I think I need to speak to somebody. But I wasn't sure what was going on. I looked, as you do, you Google it, don't you? So I was Googling it. I'd recently had a baby. So I was like, oh, postnatal depression. It's exactly what it is. I told my doctor, my midwife, all the way through my pregnancy, I think I'm going to have postnatal depression. I kept Googling it. Didn't actually have any of the symptoms, but I couldn't work out what on earth it must be. So it must have been that. It must have been the baby. That's the only thing that I could think of. So I thought, right, things aren't working for me at the minute. I need to speak to a therapist. And I went down that route. And I think to kind of share that experience, and if anybody is thinking about going and approaching a therapist, kind of say how I did it, because that might help. I had a look on the BACP website, had a look for registered people, obviously somebody who's registered, you know, make sure you've got in the right person for this. And then it's probably me to a T. And the marketing background of picking out, you know, external people that you're going to outsource issues to. I was like, right, I'm going to pick 3 people that are either close to me, look to specialize in things that I think I'd be interested in. And I interviewed them. So I went along to one lady, lovely lady, a little bit too touchy-feely for my liking. Didn't quite gel. I spoke to another lady. She was okay, but it didn't quite mix. And then the last person that I interviewed, it just clicked. She is, now she is very scientific,
Okay.
which for me, I really like. So when we're talking about things, so when my anxiety was at the highest, I don't eat very well. So if I'm anxious, some people may come for eat, I don't eat much. And my husband had been obviously very concerned, because it's been going on for a number of months, that I just wasn't managing to eat and I wasn't very hungry. And he was trying to force me to eat out of love, you know, you need to eat. And I remember saying this to her, being like, you know, I can't stomach anything at the minute. I'm just not hungry. And she just very clearly explained it. Well, it's science. You're in your sympathetic nervous system, you're in fight or flight. So when that happens, all your energy and all your resources are being put into your heart and your muscles, because you're going to have to fight or run. Your digestive system shut off.
Right.
So obviously eating food isn't going to help. I was like, oh, okay, so this isn't just me being a drama queen. Okay, this is a science thing. And then she gave me permission, and she just said, eat what you want when you want. She said, if you wake up and fancy ice cream, eat some ice cream. She said, if you want a bowl of soup at 10 p.m. at night, have a bowl of soup. Whatever you fancy. If you don't fancy anything, don't eat anything. And I was like, oh, and suddenly the science, along with the permission to just feel what I was feeling, go through it. It didn't solve it overnight. There were other issues, but it just made me understand. So I went with her. That was very much kind of scientific. We started kind of unraveling bits and pieces. And I would say when I went to her, I was about a 5 on the, you know, 10 being super, super belts and braces, mental health well, and 1 being in a really, really bad place. It's kind of a 5. So I wasn't quite me, but wasn't terribly bad. And then the straw broke the camel's back and I went downhill. And I'm so, so grateful that I had the foresight to have somebody there.
Yeah.
So when I kind of dipped down to a 3, I had someone. I didn't have to have waiting lists. I didn't have to go through the filtering, excuse me, the filtering process of trying to find somebody. I had someone there that had already got a bit of background, knew what I was doing, and could really help me. And I think that for me, I was very lucky. I was very lucky that I'd had that foresight. And I've been working with her now for a number of years, kind of covering off all kinds of different topics. We stayed together during COVID, and it's just something that I would massively, massively advocate from both a tools perspective of giving me coping tools to help manage anxiety, manage phobias, lots of different tools that we've kind of looked at for that. But also just having somebody external to your group. You know, I've got a wonderful support system. I've got wonderful friends, family, an incredible supportive husband. But there's something different about that third party, a trained third party. There's something very different. And I'm a huge advocate, and I talk very openly about going to therapy. I think sometimes I'm a bit of a bore, because I'm like, oh, well, my therapist said. Oh, do you hear that my therapist said? And I'm sure some people are like, oh my God, you know, wind it in. But I really feel, in a way that Brené Brown kind of says, that if you can, in a safe space with people that I'm comfortable with, if I can be open and share that, it normalizes therapy, but it gives the person I'm talking to the chance to maybe say that they are in a similar position, or that they may be struggling, or that they know somebody who is. And it just, my being open and honest and vulnerable allows the vulnerability from the person that I'm talking to. And I find that the more that I talk about it with people, I've never yet had a single person come to me and go, ooh, oh, really? Oh, not a single person is being met with compassion, empathy, curiosity. And I think it's a really great thing to be able to do and to be able to share, to try and help other people find the person like I found if they need to do that.
Amazing. Well, incredible. And I'm going to delve a little bit into some of those areas, if that's okay with you, Alex.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that as well. One thing you started off at the beginning talking about was obviously where you grew up, your upbringing, and sort of, from a cultural perspective, very much don't talk about this. And if you say anything, how's that changed for you? Because obviously you've just said at the end of that how open people are and how supportive they are and everything. Any sort of evolution of that for you over those years?
Yeah, I mean, so my parents now have evolved from that as well. I think there's a whole thing around me as an individual.
Yep.
I've evolved and changed and grown so much. I've got to attribute a lot of that to therapy.
Yep.
I do the work. I often use the analogy, it's like having a personal trainer. You can't have a personal trainer, go absolutely hammer it at the gym, and then walk out the door and eat McDonald's and cake for a week until you go back. You've got to do the work yourself. So I see my therapist, but then the meditation techniques, the techniques she teaches me, I go and look at those, I work on them, I research. So I really do the work myself. And I think there's been a lot of growth there to put other things that I've been told previously to one side. But I think there's also a massive shift societally that, it wasn't the done thing to talk about mental health. It wasn't really understood, and medication certainly wasn't understood, and there's a lot of stigma around it. But I think now that that stigma isn't there as much, I think there still is some taboo, but I think there's much more open dialogue, and I've just fully embraced that, because I do genuinely believe that at times you can't pull your socks up, you can't just crack on. You do need to seek some help and some support. And I've learned that not quite the hard way, but it's something that I will massively advocate to my children now and to anybody else that I meet, that there's no shame in having mental health struggles and seeking help when you need it.
Well, and you're absolutely right. The evolution of it, things have moved on. We are open. We are talking about this more, and it's interesting. You've got young children, and my children are older now, but it's the conversation that they're having, which is starting at a very young age now. And if we take ourselves, I know you're younger than I am, and by many years, but it's if we take ourselves back to those points, and for anybody that is listening, and you'll recognize this, of course, is we never talked about this sort of stuff. We never really spoke about feelings, and this is now a whole feelings-led industry around. I feel good. I feel not so good. I feel anxious. I feel happy. It's just establishing a different level of conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And, much more open with my children. We've got, my little one's got a feelings book of, how is this, look at the person's face, how are they feeling? How do you feel? You had an experience like this. But even from myself, my kids know that I go to therapy. So, and I treat it very much in the same way that, mummy goes to her exercise class to keep her body healthy, and mummy goes to the doctor and we talk about your mind to keep my mind healthy. And they know about it, and I'll tell them. I do EFT tapping, and I've shown some of that to my daughter, my eldest daughter, who can suffer from anxiety at times. Breathing techniques, we talk about all these kind of things. So it's just much more open. Nothing is shrouded in mystery with it. And I think that openness, and it's all for children, obviously, it's all within the confines and context of what they can understand. We position it not to overwhelm them and not to overshare, because I don't want to turn those into the parent. They're not worried about me in any way, but the way that I position it of, I keep my body healthy, I keep my mind healthy, that's kind of the tack that we take with them.
I think that's great. I really like that, because I think it's true, isn't it? We're always encouraged to stay healthy and eat healthy and nutrition and hydration, and but they have to, you know, we, and as parents and adults, actually, even just as adults, and I see this a lot within the training that we deliver, you know, it's very much about, people just don't understand necessarily what mental health is all about until we really define it properly. So I think it's fascinating. So I think it's doing absolutely the right thing by having that openness. I want to just take you back a little bit, if that's okay, because obviously there was a moment in time where you said, I need to do something here. Something's not quite right. I feel a little bit out of control. Maybe that's with, you know, the birth of your first child and so on. Go before then. Do you recognize now times previously where things weren't quite straight for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I used to have such bad temper
Okay.
and get really stressed out. I'd be very highly strung. I think for me, I think a lot of my anxiety came from squishing myself into a box that I thought I had to be in. So either a box that society told me I had to be in, or that I had put pressure on myself that I had to be in. So I think, you know, taking the high power jobs, the trying chasing for the next job title, wanting to go to that big company, wanting to do the best, working all the hours you could, all of these kind of things, because I thought that's what I had to do. You know, I did really well academically at school. I was the first person in my family to go to university. There was a lot kind of pressure there of you're going to succeed, you're going to do these big, great things. And I think that the definition of big, great things was, well, that must be working for a big, prestigious company, climbing the ladder, getting a big, fancy title and a pay packet to match.
Yeah.
I've since realized that that is not my definition of success at all. But that is how I felt. So I think I was squishing and pushing myself into this box, which then just led to more and more anxiety, because it was at odds with who I actually am. And I think sometimes a lot of the time, a lot of mental health issues is when there's that conflict between your inner self and the outer societal expectations or what you want to present. And I think that, I mean, therapists would have a field day on this. It's so over the top. But I think the best example of it was at work. I was Alexandra. Always Alexandra at work. Outside of work, you could call me Alex.
Right.
So these two things were so compartmentalized of, I am this person at work. I am Alexandra. I am powerful and in control and straight-laced, and I'm a hard-nosed so-and-so. And then at home, you know, I will watch crappy comedies and reality TV and slob around in my PJs. And if I can get away with not washing my hair for a few days, I makeup on, I'll do that. Just this massive contrast between the two, which, as anybody will tell you, is incredibly unhealthy, because you've got this huge conflict of I'm two separate people. And this is one of the things that we kind of worked on during therapy, of trying to work out who actually am I.
Yep.
And assimilate it. So I'm Alex. That feels more authentic and genuine to me. Although it's so funny, there are so many people, because I was so strict about it. There are so many people who are heads I've bitten off for calling me Alex that I've worked with previously. Whenever I speak to colleagues, old colleagues, the pre-Alex era, it's like, oh, I can't get used to calling you Alex. I'm like, no, it's fine now. That was a me issue, not a you issue. It's okay. But I think that really just epitomizes it, that I felt I had to be somebody I wasn't. And that was me putting some of that on myself, society putting some of that on me. But now that I've realized I don't have to do that, and I can define my own success, I can be authentically me. I can be Alex in a work setting and a home setting. I'm not saying the anxiety, it peaks every now and then, but it's just not there. It's not something that previously it was like wearing, medieval knights wear like the breastplate, the big heavy. It was that. It was the pressing on the shoulders and the chest. It was there. But I don't have that anymore.
No. That's good. That's good. That's positive, isn't it? And
Yeah,
I
it is. It is.
like the Alex and Alexandra thing. And genuinely, being open and honest, I still struggle with people calling me Matthew. It's bizarre. I don't. My mum is the one who calls me Matthew, and I still struggle with it because people use it all the time, and it's just, it's my name, so I still react. I never put anybody down by saying it, but it's bizarre.
Yes.
Now, that identity thing of who you are and how you behave, and there's that professional personal piece, isn't it, of which very much we put the veil over our personal side, and we pretend to be something on the professional side often. And I see that a lot with
Yeah.
with people that I work with today. I just, honesty is the best policy. That's what was always said, right? Albeit
Absolutely.
we were never allowed to be honest, because it was always but then if you're honest, you're obviously not with the system, or you're not playing the ball.
Exactly. And I think people can often see honesty and authenticity as overshare.
Oh yeah.
And it's not. It's absolutely not. You have the choice whether or not you are going to divulge information. And just because you choose not to doesn't make you disingenuous or any less authentic. It's about doing so on a safe space, with a safe platform, with people who you want to talk to. So whilst I am quite happy with, friends, family on this podcast to kind of, say I go to a therapist, that's not my opening gambit when I meet somebody new. Like, hi, I'm Alex. I'm in therapy. It's when I am happy to share it. And if I choose not to share that, I'm not being disingenuous. I'm not concealing. It's my choice. And that's been a massive thing that I've learned. And the EMDR has really helped me with that, of I have choices. So the whole thing with being self-employed, I have choices now. I'm not beholden, yes, I've got a mortgage that I need to pay and all the rest of it, but I'm not beholden to anybody. I have choices of how I want to present, what information I want to share, what work I want to do. And I think that has probably been the greatest thing for me, learning through therapy, of I have choices now.
Yeah, you do. It's so true as well, isn't it? So I think that's where a lot of people become sort of beholden to the work they have, and they can't restructure themselves in a way that helps them to almost release that sort of armor that's they're carrying around, and the heavy weight that they bear. It's so interesting. I want to talk about where you are now then, Alex, if that's okay, because obviously different space. You're not in a corporate world now, albeit you work with corporates and individual companies. What's your drive now? What do you want to do with what you're into right now? And how does that connect to mental health for you?
So my kind of personal values are freedom and growth.
Yep.
And my kind of purpose, if you would, my value position, my purpose is to help spark joy in others, joy, ideas, success. So that can be anything. And again, this whole transition of personal and business. As a marketing consultant, that can be sharing my information and knowledge and experience with somebody to create a brand new campaign or a new value prop or a strategy. Yep. Or it can just be saying to somebody, oh, do you know what? There's this really great podcast on mental health. Here's the link, give it a listen. Yep. And that's what I like to do in both personal capacity and a professional capacity, is just share things that I think can spark joy in others, because what's better than doing that?
Oh, I love it. I know it's about energy, isn't it? It goes hand in hand, I think, doesn't it? So a lot of people's energy, if you think about where we're at and what's going on, it's difficult, isn't it, to find energy when things are really difficult right now for so many people. And actually, for me, the spark represents something that helps to energize. And that's ultimately I think what we're all trying to achieve, isn't it? It's sort of like, how do we lead a more positive mental health journey when things are really really difficult and negative? So your newsletter is called The Spark, right? And I'm subscribed to that. And I say that out loud because I want people to subscribe to it and learn more through your journey and what you're doing. So we'll drop a link into that for you as well. So we'll make sure that's attached to this. Got a few more minutes left, just before we sort of have to wrap this conversation. And this whole conversation around mental health, you talk about therapy, you talk about some of the different solutions and things that you've experienced. Now, I just want to say, before we talk about those, and I know you've experienced and you've spoken about a little bit of them already, is of course everybody's individual and unique and different. So it doesn't always mean everything works for everybody. And it's never that we're promoting things to go, oh my God, that's going to fix your life and solve your problems. It's more an individual personal journey. So tell us a little bit more about some of those different techniques that you've established.
So for me, the most transformative thing that I've undertaken is EMDR. So that's eye movement movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So I've done this for a few different things. I've done it for some trauma things and phobia. And the way that it works is by having bilateral stimulation. So you think on an issue, so whatever the issue is. So take my phobia. So I had a phobia of sand.
Okay.
So we'll dig into that another time.
Yeah.
A phobia of sand. So I had to think of the earliest point where this phobia of sand was an issue. So you kind of hold that almost like a tableau. You build the picture in your mind, hold that in your mind. And then whilst your mind is holding that and in the past, you focus with your therapist on a moving object. So be it a finger, a pencil, something like that. So your eyes are going back and forth. So your brain is active in the present because you are seeing something and having to move, but you're also holding on to something in the past. And the idea of it is that this allows the trauma, the phobia to be processed.
Okay.
Because if, you know, any kind of traumas, phobias that you have, you get the reaction like the very first time. So, you know, when you get that trigger and the anxiety comes back and you react in that way, obviously that's detrimental to your mental health. It's not good. But it's because that actual experience hasn't been processed. It's as soon as it happens, the trigger, it's brought right to the front, to the present. And it feels like it's happening there and then, even though, you know, it might have just been a word that somebody said or a sound or a smell.
Yeah.
The danger is present straight away. Whereas this helps you, the analogy my therapist used was kind of put it in a filing cabinet. Okay. So you're not forgetting, you're not, putting a plaster over it. So I did hypnotherapy as well with the phobia to try and sort that. That was a band-aid for me. That helps for a bit, but it didn't last. This has filed it. Okay. So I now understand the root cause of the phobia. When you're doing the EMDR as well, you have a positive cognition. Yep. So it starts off, you know, the phobia, sand is dangerous. How do you feel about that? I'm like, yes, it is terrifyingly dangerous to me. We're up kind of off the charts. And then you do your EMDR, and then you process the feelings that you're feeling and you talk about them, and then you go again and again and again, until basically when you're asked, it's no longer up here, it's down here. And at that point, you develop a positive cognition. So mine was, I have choices, and you've got to say how true that was. So right at the beginning, sand, I don't have a choice. If the sand there, it's going to get me and I've got to get on it and I can't deal with it. Whereas once I had gone through it all, the threat level had lowered, but also the positive cognition of I have choices made me feel more empowered around how I deal with that phobia. It's just, it's super interesting. And after a number of years doing talking therapy, I personally, again, personal experience, found that EMDR was the quickest way to solve the traumas and the phobias. That's not to say it can work for everybody, but I think if there is a very specific thing, yep, and a very specific point that you can hook onto, it is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I think Prince Harry did an interview and he used EMDR. I think Kate Galloway from BBC, one of the breakfast programs, she's used it as well. So I think more people are talking about it, but it's incredible.
Yeah, amazing. Well, if it works for you, you know, and it's been something that you've managed to, you know, use and utilize and helped you through the, you know, your experiences, great. And I think we always recommend, or we not recommend, but we always encourage people to try different avenues and different thoughts, because, you know, otherwise we get stuck in a path where we don't know what to do, where to turn. You know, there's obviously other therapies, CBT, NLP, and you know, all these other things out there. So, you know, thank you for sharing that and for explaining it in the way that you did, Alex, because it's really helpful. We are right towards the end of this now. And just final thoughts from you in a second, and there will be that. Do you have anything that you want to share, any motivational thoughts or quotes that you love? I'll just share that, you know, thought with you quickly before I introduce that final piece with you. But just to say a huge thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for being so open, and thank you for sharing your journey with mental health and the experiences that you've been through, and you know what's been going on for you over the last few years. And I just want to wish you all the best with everything. Throwing it over to you to close. Final thoughts.
Oh, I think my final thoughts are ask the question and reach out. If there's anything that's niggling, just reach out to somebody and speak to them, because somebody's always going to be there to listen. And you never know what that first reaching out will lead to and how much better it might be able to make you feel.
Amazing. And I think about the first time that we connected, and we just, I don't even know, I can't even remember exactly what happened, but you know what, there was a point in time where we connected, and now we're here having this conversation, and I'm learning so much more about how mental health works for other people, which has just been incredible. Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me on this. And yeah, look after yourself. Good luck with the spark and everything else that you're doing, of course, and enjoying that balance and looking after your little ones as well. So all the best. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.